Hi. In the previous videos we have seen how linguists can also work in the lab. How we can figure out things about aphasia or about reading in the brain while doing experiments in a lab. So that's also a natural place for linguists to be. I'm going to discuss these issues more with my student Martin now.
So my main question is, we've looked at the results of what linguists do in the lab. We haven't really actually looked into the lab. So I was wondering, do you know how these experiments actually really work?
Yeah, right. This is a good question, right? So far, although we say we're doing experiments, we have been actually rather theoretical about it. So we have been just talking about doing experiments rather than doing experiments themselves. Now, one reason for that is that the lab is not really the place where I work as a linguist a lot. But the good thing is that fortunately here in Leiden we do have linguistic labs and we have talented young researchers working there.
My name is Daan van der Velde. I'm a linguist and speech scientist at Leiden University. I research the speech of people who are wearing a cochlear implant. A cochlear implant is a surgically implanted hearing device for people who are deaf. So they will receive a surgery in which a wire with electrodes is inserted into their cochlea. The cochlea are the inner part of the ear. That's why it's called a cochlear implant.
Right.
And after that has been done, they can to some extent hear speech and music and all other sounds again.
Right, so they don't need a hearing device external to the ear anymore because they have the thing
Precisely.
Right.
Yes.
So, but then what does it sound like? Does it sound the same as the way we perceive sound now, or is it different?
It's quite different.
Okay.
They're trying to make it better and better, but the way it works now, the sound for them is very different. I can play an example for you.
Yeah, please.
This is a Dutch sentence which has been processed as if it sounds as if you are wearing a cochlear implant. So it's a simulation.
Right.
Yes.
So what I hear, I know nothing about this. So what I hear is there's a sort of pattern. So there's dynamic, but I can't really hear vowels or consonants or stuff like that.
Yes, that's right. Yes. So for instance, it's very hard for them to hear tones, melody in speech. Music is also very difficult, but you can hear some kind of rhythm.
Yeah.
So the dynamic pattern and the temporal pattern, they are audible. So what we think is that the way they listen to speech is different from the way we listen to speech. They pay attention to different kinds of aspects in speech, different cues. And that's something that you can research, what they can hear, what they cannot hear.
So what sort of experiments do you do so that you can research this?
In this case, what we're doing is to use simulation of cochlear implants. So then you can use normally hearing people, and there are many more of those, and they're much more alike. So it's very useful, and you can manipulate the way the speech is processed. And with a real cochlear implant, you couldn't do that. It's just the way an implant works for a specific patient. In this case, we can manipulate things. But what we do here is to simulate a conversation between two normally hearing people, and we process their speech as if they are wearing a cochlear implant. That's called vocoding. There's one speaker who is in a recording booth, and there's a listener who is in another booth. They will see the following thing on the screen. First there will be instructions, and then they will see a sentence, carrier sentence with 4 words. So they will have to pronounce the sentence with the word that has been emphasized on the screen.
Right, so the sentence is I say and then a blank to you, and they have to say one of these 4 words.
Yes.
On that blank.
Yes. And the listener doesn't know which word has been pronounced. So the listener sees the same 4 words, and then has to ask the speaker, is this the word that you pronounce?
Right.
Because it's not clear for them. It sounds very, very difficult.
Yeah,
it's very
like
difficult to hear.
yeah.
So for them, it's not obvious what word has been pronounced. And then the speaker will pronounce it again, and then we compare the first against the second speech segment.
Yeah.
And then we think that they will, when they have to emphasize their speech, they will do it in such a way that the listener can hear it despite the distortion of the speech.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
So in this way you figure out how listening to language works while you are in these very difficult circumstances, right? So
Yes.
what is still important about speech, about human language while you are in these
Yes, how you listen to speech.
circumstances? How do we listen to speech maybe
Yes.
even more generally?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
So this is, I guess, this is a good example
Yeah.
of why you would go into the lab in the first place, right? So I mean, how would you ever figure out what this speech sounds like for people who have a cochlear implant,
Yeah.
right? You cannot go and ask them because they cannot tell you, right? You cannot try to do it theoretically because, well, there's no way you can ever think of that sound
Yeah.
you just heard would be the actual sound.
Yeah. But surely there are more experiments going on here, right? So
There must be more experiments. Maybe, well, we find another talented young researcher here.
you.
Hello.
Hi,
What is your name?
my name is Arum Purwitasari. I'm one of PhD students in LUCL Leiden University Center for Linguistics.
Good. And what is your research?
Mainly I'm working on field psycholinguistics. What
On
is
field
that?
psycholinguistics, yes.
I want to know how people actually perceive languages. Well, basically I'm working on second language learners, how they produce, well, non-native vowels which did not exist in their first language.
Right.
I want to see whether these vowels, which I said contrastive in their first language, then influence the process they perceive and produce second language.
Right, because what I would think is that if, for example, there is a sound in my language, like for example in week 2 of the course, we talked about Hawaiian, and they don't make a difference between T and K. They're just the same sound.
Yeah.
So if they would have to hear tip
Exactly.
and kip, for example,
Yeah.
So how does that work?
What if second language learners? Well, I work in Javanese and Sundanese. We don't have vowel inventors the same as English.
Right. Those are languages of Indonesia. right?
Indonesians.
Right.
We don't have long vowels. We never say beat. We never say long E, long A, and so on.
Right.
Then would it be unfortunate for us to know or to learn English, or we just, okay, I don't want to learn English because I don't know the long vowels.
Right.
No, of course not, right? We have to find solution. We have to find why actually that happened.
Yeah.
And one way to figure it out is, well, doing experiment.
Right.
That's-
So we do observe that when we
Yeah.
have Javanese speakers, Sundanese speakers, and they're trying to learn English, they have a hard time hearing the difference
Yeah.
between, well, tip and
Yeah.
teep.
Yeah.
But now the question is, what do they actually hear? And what do they actually say? So where is the problem? Because we may want to solve that problem.
Interesting. But well, we are actually working on the production of how they produce vowels in English, and we compare them with our control group. It's a bit hard to do it really in the real situation because we need to record them and we need to make them in the same situation because this is comparison, cross-linguistic. So we compare the participants, experimental participants, Javanese and Sundanese, and we compare the result of their speech production and perception with the native English, and we want to see
Right.
how they are different.
But what do you do? What do you do with your
One
participants?
thing I can show is I did mouse tracking experiment. This is the experiment which I recorded their hand movement.
Because the mouse means A computer mouse. Huh?
Computer mouse, not
Right.
the mouse in the kitchen.
Right. And
Okay.
So you track, you have some software
Yeah.
which tracks how people move their mouse.
True. So during our experiment, I will ask them to sit down in front of a computer which has mouse tracking software, and it will appear the long and short vowels in two different sides. Then they will click start,
Click B, please.
and then they have to move their cursor right away, whether they hear beat or they hear bit,
Right.
whether it's long vowels or short vowels.
Right.
So from that moment, if they directly choose the answer, make smooth lines, or whether they make a revision,
Right.
they go negatively toward the incorrect response and come up with the correct one.
Right. So you bring your laptop to Indonesia.
That's true.
With the mouse, and then you do this experiment, and the software can track exactly what people do with their mouse, so that you know whether they hesitate, maybe they go a little bit in the
Yeah.
wrong direction, or they go
Whether
straight.
they go a bit slower than a native speaker, that's why we count on their reaction time, and also we see their mouse trajectories.
Right.
Of course, computer mouse trajectories. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, cool.
And so what kind of things do you find? Do you find that indeed people, what kind of differences are there?
Interestingly, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fortunately, yes.
I compared the result of control group native English speakers. Of course, they directly make a motor execution. They directly answer that correctly. Smooth lines. Well, the second language learners, they make a kind of confusion during their motor response. That's exactly true. Yeah.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, this, I guess, is yet another example of why we need labs, right? And you can have a very small lab, which is just the size of a laptop and a computer mouse, but still that counts as a little lab, and you find out things which you would never be able to find out otherwise. Now, in the next video, we asked also our informants to do tiny little experiments on themselves. They didn't have labs, but we asked them to record some kind of speech errors they made in the past few weeks. And we're going to analyze them together with the informants and also together with you.